Well, good evening and welcome to This is the Day. Now, in today's show, we have a one-on-one with the 2022 presidential aspirant Reuben Kigame on the state of the nation. We'll also look at the church and the LGBTQ question and whether the church has handled it correctly. I'm Frederick Njiri, but first, let's get the highlights with Jane Defoe.
Thank you, Fred. Kisumu County leaders have mourned Kenya's first female MP and Mayor Mama Grace Onyango, terming her death a big blow. Also, the National Fund for the Disabled of Kenya has unveiled 2.7 million shillings in dormitories for boys at the Kibo School for the Blind in Kisumu. Moreover, a cartel fraudulently selling food processing company Del Monte's land has emerged in Murang'a County. The fraudsters are using the land to make a killing and include some government officers, business people, and brokers. And finally, the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, has stepped up its campaign for the harmonization of a roaming network that will include a shared ICT infrastructure with other regional blocks in at least 29 African countries. That's it for the highlights. Back to you, Fred.
Well, Kenya is one of the most beautiful countries in the world with so many resources that are the envy of many Western countries. One of the country's best resource is its people, who are hardworking and very kind. However, the one thing that is now considered as Kenya's Achilles heel is corruption. Over the years, the gain achieved by the ordinary man has been eaten up by this cancer that seems to defy every effort and institution that has been thrown at it. This has been made worse by the ongoing crisis in the world that is causing the cost of living to rise way beyond the reach of many people. The present government says it has put in place mechanism to try and reverse this. Is it working? That's $1 million question. We speak to Reuben Kigame, one of the presidential aspirants in the last general election. And we started off by asking him whether the state of the nation, in his opinion, is getting better.
The nation is in a state of confusion. Some people are still in the campaign mode. Others have moved on. There are people who are also, involved in a lot of sideshows. But most of all, I think the nation is in an economic crisis. Mm-hmm. And that is the one thing that characterizes everybody, whether you have a job or you don't, whether you are young or old. The economy is bad.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at some of the measures that the current government says that it has put in place to try and revive the economy, do you think some of these measures are working? I remember we were supposed to see the cost of living going down. They have put down some measures, including, subsidizing fertilizers. Do you think this is going to work?
Fred, we don't have a government.
What?
We have a club of looters sitting in office. Mm-hmm. All the wrong people are in government.
What do you mean all the wrong people are in government?
Beginning with the appointments. The president appointed people of questionable character. People with cases in courts before the DPP. Mm-hmm. People that were adversely mentioned. Those are the people that attract the president's attention mm-hmm. for appointment. And that is the wrong way to do government. And so if you ask whether the economic measures put in place are working, I say truly for a government that is that rogue, there are really nothing could work except, trial and error. This is more than 6 months of being in office almost. And we are still talking about the future. before they went, into government, they made a lot of concrete promises that in 100 days this will happen, in this span of time, or this is our agenda as the Kenya Kwanza, and one after the other, it's a toppling of promises.
What about the fact that one of the things that they're saying, first and foremost, is 6 months enough to audit a government, whether it's working or not? And then one of the things they've been saying is that before they took over, when they took over, they discovered that the economy had been literally ripped. So right now is first getting it back to normal and then now getting things done.
Fred, we are so accustomed as Kenyans to nonsensical thinking. For example, when you say the economy was looted, you need to answer by who?
Yes.
Because if the economy was looted by a president that went out of office and the current president was deputy president, then they both looted. That's the simple man's logic.
Yes.
So you can't keep saying the former government looted and you were part of it. Secondly, this messiah complex that gives Kenyans the thought that if you get into office, you solve every problem. That can't work for a dilapidated economy. So there are progressive things, and then there are, things that should happen now. So, for example, the issue of the cost of living.
Yes.
That should be the priority.
Do you think they should? Do you think they should go with subsidies? Should they subsidize food?
No. It goes with planning. Government is about planning.
Yes.
It's like trying to drive a vehicle with a puncture.
Yes.
You don't continue driving. You park.
Yes.
And fix the puncture.
Yes.
So the issue is this: if you say you have no money to do anything to improve the cost of living,
yes,
and at the same time you are creating offices, completely useless offices, like offices of the spouse of chief minister.
Yes.
What is that? We should be knocking off government offices, not creating new ones, non-existing ones. They're not in the constitution. So the spending of State House, it's very, very high. In fact, State House is spending roguely. And so if there was no money and you're spending like what you'd spend in 2 years, you're spending in 3 months.
Yes.
It means you are extravagant. When you have no food in the house, you don't go to a supermarket and buy, 6 cans of ice cream and 10 pizzas and so on. You go on survival mode.
Yes.
And it's all about planning. So, for example, you ask the question, what do Kenyans need to put food on the table now, not later?
Yes.
And so that preoccupies you. I don't want to hear about whose mistake in the past government, or who won the election or who did not. I don't want to hear anything about, money is being stolen. It's being stolen. You're in government. Stop it.
Yes. Finally, probably before you go, is there hope for this country? When we look at things happening, it feels as though we're in a hopeless situation. And I know there are people who are unable to afford food. They can't do it. Right now, they're feeling as though the world is on their shoulder and crashing in on them. Is there hope for this kind of a person?
Yes, there is a lot of hope. And the first place of hope is you asking the question that you are doing something as media to inspire hope, to inspire a different way of looking at our country. That itself is very hopeful for me, because there are places where you cannot talk about these things. I'm definitely worried about where the country is going with the dictatorship and the move towards the one-party, kind of state like we were in the Moi era. That's what the Malalas and the rest are trying to do to us. Shame on them. I don't think we want to go back there. And I'm definitely worried about the Auditor General coming to tell us that she was under duress to sign this or the other. Face your cross. If you signed and we lost money, pay it back or help recover it. But as far as the citizens are concerned, there's a lot of hope. The first person to grab onto that hope is me. If there was no hope for me, I would have succumbed with the kind of torture and the mistreatment that I went through as an aspirant. And even as a Christian, I would have given up. So many challenges in my life, imposed by this government and the previous governments, but we keep going. So if I can hope, let Kenyans hope. I am like an architect who goes to an open field and there is no construction, but I can see where the bedroom will be. I can see where the kitchen will be. I believe I can see what the next government of Kenya looks like. Lipo Tumaini.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Kigame, for that. Well, have your take on that. Now, the ruling by the Supreme Court giving the LGBTQ community the right to form an NGO is still causing ripples in the society, and mostly so the religious community who have vowed to have the ruling reviewed. The Christian professionals have already sought to have the ruling reviewed, claiming the judgment was erroneous. The political class, through Homa Bay Town Member of Parliament Peter Kaluma, have also intimated plans to introduce a bill on the floor of the House that will see those caught in the act jailed for life. However, there is a school of thought that is now saying the church needs to find a different way of dealing with the LGBTQ question, so as not to turn it into an us versus them situation. And so we spoke to Pastor Arnold Orono, and we started off by asking him, has the church handled this right?
I love at least a bit of the responses that I've seen out in the social media. One, I think it was important that we take a stand, a vocal stand in terms of communicating with the nation what our position is. So I like that stand first, that we need to first communicate and communicate why. Before we jump into, throwing tantrums and throwing things all over the place, we need to first explain our stand. This is why we make this stand, give a biblical backing behind our stand, a biblical reference to what we're doing, which I think one or two organizations have done outside there, and I think that has been beautiful. I also love the fact that one of the things that came out clearly was, look, we hate the sin, but we love the sinner. Because sometimes it's made to look like the church hates homosexuals. We love the people, but we hate the sin. We hate what they're embroiled with, or we hate what they engaged with. And having understood that, or having seen it from that perspective, now the next phase would be now to begin to engage with the legal process, because it was a legal response or legal action that sort of opened this door. Sort of fight fire with fire, engage with the legal process. There are some question marks over that process because it opens the door to other illegal activities. If you're really saying that while gayism is not legal, the association of gays is legal, it opens the door to other activities. Like, one of the people in social media says there are other activities that people engage with that are also not legal. Does it mean that they're also entitled to meet together? So I think that process of just responding, fighting fire with fire, because the process has taken a legal dimension, we need to respond to it from that perspective.
Now, on your second point, you said, bringing it out that we hate the sin, not the sinner. Has that come out clearly? Because I look at the situation that happens in most Western countries, and it almost looks as though it is the us versus them. What do we need to do to ensure that it does not come as us versus them?
Well, one of the things we're going to have to accept is that we are into the end times, and in the end times, men will be lovers of themselves, men will be boastful, men will be proud. So some of these battles that we are fighting are associated with the nature of the season that we are in.
Yes.
And one of the things I realized is that this battle, especially about the LGBTQ agenda, is not just an intellectual battle. It's not just a battle of culture. It's also an economic battle. When you look at how this is being propagated, if you look at, for example, the LGBTQ community as a percentage of the whole, the whole world, as it were, I'm not even sure they get up to 5% of the whole world. But because the people who are propagating that agenda, many of them are financially endowed, many of them have deep pockets, they're able to change narratives, they're able to swing narratives. It takes an economic dimension, it becomes an economic approach, to things.
So how do we deal with it, or how does the church deal with it? Because if you look at what is happening, it's happening in the schools, it's happening in most of the places that we take our kids to. So how do we basically get to that? Is it that the church or Christians took their hands off these areas so that now something else is coming to replace, because nature abhors a vacuum?
Yes. I think it's a myriad of issues. I think it's not just one. I agree with what you said, that I think we neglected our responsibility to get into schools and to get into forums and places where this gay agenda has been promulgated and propagated. So those are spaces that we need to get back into. I think another part of the reason is because, I keep asking. I was at a meeting recently. I had traveled and I was at this meeting, and one of the people we were praying for in this meeting was really weeping, and he was talking about how he had been a gay person for a long time, and a few months ago he had turned his life around, but he was talking about the gay urges was still there. And I asked myself, how open would the church be to that kind of honesty? If somebody came and stood up in church, or somebody came to a prayer line and said, hey, you know what? Look, I converted from gayism a few years ago or a few months ago, but I still have those urges. How do we deal with it? Mm-hmm. So sometimes I feel even we as a church have not come to that place of maturity where we're able to handle this the way we should handle it. It's still a very taboo subject. Mm-hmm. It's still, if somebody came and said that, we would want to run away and, leave that to the pastor to deal with that issue. Yes. So we still have those issues that we need to debunk our minds from, that every one of us is a minister. Every one of us has a responsibility to love them. If somebody came and talked about their issues, we should be in a place where we don't judge them from a religious perspective, but we're able to share with them what the word of the Lord says in terms of what God thinks about it and what God has made available for them to get out of where they are. Mm-hmm. And then, like you said also, I think we need to begin to look at the source of some of these issues. There's a lot of this that is being promulgated in high schools. There are a lot of this that is promulgated in universities. So we need to become more aggressive in terms of going into universities, going into high schools, and beginning to just address the issues at that level, opening our hearts, opening our doors wide and telling them, hey, you guys, we're here. We are ready to talk. One of my understandings or realizations about this whole agenda is many of our youth get into gayism and lesbianism because of experimentation. They're really experimenting because this thing sounds new. There's a lot of money behind these things. Then 1 or 2 years later, 1 or 2 years down the line, they find themselves so rooted in this and they're tired and they want to get out, but there's no way they can get out. So I think the church needs to provide a way of escape, shelters where they can come and shelter, sometimes even a way of getting them jobs, so that when you get out of that kind of lifestyle, if that kind of lifestyle has been maintaining you in terms of paying for your house rent and paying for whatever it is, begin to give you alternatives in terms of being able to live elsewhere, etc., etc. So I think it's just a whole strategy that we need to think through and to work through to be able to address some of those issues.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Pastor Orono. Thank you for taking time to talk to us. Now, on our segment, Talk of the Town, we went to the streets to find out what you think about the whole LGBTQ question.
One thing, LGBTQ itakuja itarau the family legacy, unaona? So when LGBTQ is introduced, you'll find most of the youths, they are not getting into marriages.
They do deserve their own rights because they're still humans. And I mean, it's a matter of choice. And I mean, according to the society, it is morally wrong and everything. But I believe that is something they literally have zero control over. As much as I try, if I am a lesbian, it doesn't matter how much I try to be attracted towards a guy. It's just not going to happen.
LGBTQ
haifai kuwa allowed tu kabisa. Mimi na support the church, unaona, because hata unaona gava ikikubali, unaona, still see according to culture yetu ya African culture, it's not allowed.
Not everyone is born that way, but it's how they are nurtured. And by virtue of being human, everyone has a right to their own sexes. We're all human, and nobody should be discriminated because of their choice.
Kwa Bible imekataliwa na hakuna venye mwanaume anaweza oa mwanamume mwenzake na utarajiwa atapata watoto.
I don't support it kwa sababu that's unethical. There's no way inaweza kwa mwanaume na date mwanaume mwingine ama dem could date dem. For me, I totally don't support and I disagree with LGBTQ.
Sisi wanadamu na ndio tuko msingi wa Biblia. Kwa nini tuende kinyume na Mungu?
Story na kusupport vitu kama hizo ziko wrong because na damage like morals and say tumeishi kufunzwa like unajua hata kwa Bible anasemanga like populate and fill the world, lakini sasa utapopulate and fill the world aje kwa uko busy huko hivi unafuatana na wanaume wenzako ati ndo unaenda kuoa, wasichana wenzako ndo unaenda kuoa. So the church iko right.
They should avoid doing gay because we are in a country which is also being ruled by God. So people do not misbehave and do bad things.
Today on Did You Know, we go back in time. Now, today in history, in Russia, the February Revolution, known as such because of Russia's use of the Julian calendar, began on March 8, 1917, when riots and strikes over the scarcity of food erupted in Petrograd. 1 week later, centuries of Tsarist rule in Russia ended with the abdication of Nicholas II, and Russia took a dramatic step closer toward communist revolution. By 1917, most Russians had lost faith in the leadership ability of the Tsarist regime. Government corruption was rampant, the Russian economy remained backward, and Nicholas repeatedly dissolved the Duma, the Russian parliament established after the revolution of 1905, when it opposed his will. However, the immediate cause of the February Revolution, the first phase of the Russian Revolution of 1917, was Russia's disastrous involvement in World War I. That's it for Did You Know?
Now with that, we bring the curtains down on the show. And don't forget to send us your videos from wherever you are, highlighting the area that needs to be addressed on the number that I gave you earlier, 0786 316 316.